My name's Danny Leigh. We're here to discuss something which I think can still feel a bit like a forbidden subject in the screen industry, which is money. The money that it takes to make a project, but also the money that filmmakers themselves have to make to get by in what is usually a freelance industry, in which you only get paid when something actually gets onto screen, and sometimes not even then. It's obviously made that much harder if you don't have the advantages of financial support from family or elsewhere. So that's why we're here today to ask the question, can I afford to work in the screen industry? And we're lucky enough to have an absolutely brilliant panel with us to unpack that question. Let me introduce them all. Karla Williams is a scriptwriter who's worked on projects for companies including Amazon and ITV. And she's also the founder of production company MsMono, which has made award-winning short films and is now also working on audio projects. Sarah Leigh is a writer and director and the founder of production company Inclusivity Films, which tells stories that raise awareness of social issues and which advocate for others. Jordon Scott Kennedy is a writer, director, and founder of production company Idlework Factory. He's also the creative lead at the Unit, which is an open access space for filmmakers in Bradford. So listen, thank you to all of you for joining us. And I wanted to ask each of you actually the same question to start, which is when you each first knew that you wanted to work in film, and then how quickly you realized that money, or maybe the lack of money, was going to be a factor in that. Sarah, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I'm very pleased to be here. I knew from a very young age that I wanted to be a storyteller. I didn't quite know in what form that would be, but I used to write so many short stories, mostly about witches and vampires, and still do. And my last film was a vampire film, so it kind of has just led on to that. I'd go to car boots and pick up cameras wherever I could. My first pay packet, I bought this is going to show my age a little bit, a mini DV camera. Um, where we used to have to edit in a very different way on those. And so I knew that I always liked to make things. I'd create like little radio shows with my brother in the bedroom so I knew that was always a thing. And I didn't really think that money would be a barrier at all when I was a kid or, in my teens until I had to travel into London. And then that's when I really realised I'm only 30 miles outside of London in Stevenage. So I'm not far. It's like 20 minutes on the train, but it's still, back then even then was like the best part of 20 quid. And if you go in like regularly, it soon adds up. So yeah, I think that's when I really started to notice it.
Carla, how about you?
So I've been writing kind of on the side for years, and I actually didn't think I could have a career in the industry because I didn't really see anyone doing what I was doing. I didn't know anyone who worked in the industry. And then in 2015, I got made redundant from a job I had at the National Theatre. And I felt quite strongly that if I don't pursue being a writer now, then I'm never going to be able to pursue it. And the reason why I could do that was I used to live in a flat share, but I think 4 months before I got made redundant, I'd actually moved back in to live with my dad and my sister. And I'd saved now, which is not much money at all, like £1,700. So money was a factor for me from the very beginning. And it's because I moved back home with my dad and because I had that £1,700 saved that I thought, okay, cool, let's pursue this writing thing. I think for me, what the challenge was, I thought there'd be more money coming in a lot sooner than it actually did. So that £1,700 disappeared very quickly. And then again, as a writer, especially breaking into TV, there's a lot you have to do unpaid. Like you need to be able to demonstrate what you can do as a writer. So to start my career and continually throughout my career, I've always had jobs to supplement the income. And the scale of the supplement has changed, but I've always had to have additional jobs outside of the industry because, yeah, money's been a huge factor from the very beginning for me personally.
And Jordon, how about you?
Yeah, it was a funny one. Thanks for having me, by the way. Yeah, no, it was a funny one because like I sort of knew straight away that money or lack of were going to be like a major factor. But to be honest with you, I wasn't really bothered. Do you know what I mean? Because for me, when I started out, it weren't about working in the industry. It was about learning how to make films so I could like tell stories that I just didn't feel represented on film, TV. I always go back to like Kes. Like Kes were made in 1969, and that were like one film I saw as a kid where I felt represented by it. And apart from that, I'd not seen a character like myself until the first season of Shameless, when they, like Leigh Gallagher were kind of like an aspirational, intelligent, working class lad from a council estate. So all I really wanted to do was learn how to make films, and I sort of just accepted from day one that I weren't going to make much money out of it. But I did want to be a filmmaker from being like 5. You know, like my dad let me watch whatever I wanted as a kid, which, you know, traumatizes you to an extent, but also gives you like a wealth of like creative references and stuff. And that's all I ever wanted to do. But I didn't start writing my own scripts until I was 22, because it was kind of like where I'm from. Creativity is kind of seen as something like that. It's a sign of madness, I suppose. So like I didn't start writing my own scripts, but then when I did, my life and like outlook on life completely changed. And then like I completely fluked into film school. I didn't have any like grades from school or anything, but yet for some reasons a film school like took a chance on me, and I went there just to learn how to make films. But in my mind, coming out of film school, I always felt like I were always going to be independent, because I didn't see many people like myself in the industry. You know, maybe like Shane Meadows, and there's been a few before that, but there weren't that many people that sort of like are role models for young working class people. So I kind of just accepted it from day one that I'm going to be skint, but I weren't really bothered, because like for me, I worked from like being literally 10 years old. I had a job up until when I was 22. I'd got into like retail and I proper hated it, but I were actually earning all right money because I could just blag people into like buying stuff. So like, but I was just like so unhappy, and I got to a point where I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to take a chance and go to film school and just make films purely because of the feeling it gives me making films. And then I've just sort of like found out like 10 years into it that if you stay true to yourself and you don't chase the money does eventually find you. And as well, because you're not motivated by money, gives you a little bit more power as well, because it means that you can't be bought. And I think that's, in some ways, it's ended up being a strength that I never expected money and I never chased it, but now I'm able to commit like full time to the industry. But yeah, it was never about working in the industry. I just wanted to make films.
It does sound like for all three of you actually that like even before you get to the question of whether you can make a living doing this, there is this baseline passion that like all three of you, and it sounds obvious when you say it, but you know, not every filmmaker would have that. You have got this sort of, all three of you, an unstoppability. You know, there's a kind of belief in what you're doing creatively that can carry you a long way. So it's almost like maybe the first takeaway is that if you have that passion, that is quite something to have in your back pocket, right?
I would definitely agree. And also because for me, I didn't really sort of become focused in trying to get into the industry until like my early 30s. So I'd spent 10, 15 years doing jobs that I hated. And I knew, and yes, they paid money, not great money, but I had a regular income. But I have not, they didn't give me any fulfillment whatsoever. So a creative for me, a creative career was something always on the side that I thought would I have to stay a hobby. And it wasn't until, like I said, I got made redundant from this job that I was like, well, actually, I want to pursue this as more than just a hobby. But yeah, definitely had the passion from the beginning. Um, and once you've done a whole bunch of jobs that bring you zero fulfillment, you also fed up of staying on that road. So you kind of have nothing to lose because you've been there and you're not loving it. So what do you have to lose to try and kind of pursue a creative career?
Yeah, I mean, picking up on that point, Karla, I mean, the name of today's session is obviously, can I afford to work in the screen industries? I mean, I was going to ask if there was a point where you had ever actually thought, no, I probably can't. It sounds like you had those moments, but would your advice to people be that even if they do feel that, even if they do feel like actually there are moments when I can't do this, you just have to kind of power through that a little bit?
I think you have to. So I think for me, the answer from the beginning is I can't afford to work in this industry. So which is why I've always had jobs along the side. I think particularly as a writer, you need to figure out a way that you can be writing and creating stuff while also paying the bills. And it's different for different people. So I know of several writers I know of now, myself included, still have part-time jobs. So I think the question of can you afford to work in the industry, generally coming from a working class background, the answer is no. But that doesn't mean you can't find out ways to still be creative and do what you need to be doing to move that career forward while also supplementing that income in a different way. So my background before that 15 years was admin. So I've got quite strong administration skills. So that's what I can use to keep bringing the money in. Whereas other people I know have different skills in different areas, but you need to balance both those sides, the creative and actually paying the bills.
Jordon, how about for you? I mean, whether it's for you or whether it's filmmakers that you know, I mean, when people are starting out and actually maybe, you know, moving through their career, how much is there always going to be a constant back and forth between getting their creative work done, putting their energies into that, and actually having, as Karla's been talking about, having to actually get the bills paid by other forms of work?
Yeah, I think you've got to decide which is the most important currency to you. Like, is it money or is it time? For me, it was I could live within my means. I didn't have an expensive lifestyle. You know, it was literally I used to work enough to cover my rent, get me beer tokens, and literally, like buy food because that's apparently quite important as well if you want to like stay alive. But like I literally would just, I'd earn like maybe like 400 or 500 quid a month, 600 quid, and then I'd be like, right, any spare like time I've got now, I'm turning down shifts because I'm serious about making films. So I did, and as bad as it sounds, I sort of like did the bare minimum at work as well. So I'd always look for jobs that were like the most boring job you could find, so I could just get paid to sit around writing scripts all day and, just writing stuff on back of till receipts and stuff like that. So I'm a nightmare employee and I used to get sacked quite a lot. I think my record was I got sacked after 4 days once, which I won't explain why because we've got a PG audience here. But yeah, I got sacked after 4 days. So yeah, for me, I had a very inexpensive lifestyle, and the rest of the time I was just purely focused on making films because that was just all that interested me. I see some people where it's what happens is you sort of like you start doing a day job and then that life gets involved. So like as soon as you start hitting like your 30s and stuff, it's like time to settle down, time to have kids, time to buy an house. And then if you work in a job where you're not like me, you're actually good at it and you're getting promoted, before you know it, it consumes your life. And then the filmmaking side just becomes like a side hustle or a hobby. Or you go and work in film industry and you're doing like running jobs and stuff, but no one tells you when you start out that it's an expensive lifestyle, because when you're out in London working on film crews with exciting people that, stimulate you and inspire you, there's also the social aspect that comes with it. So I know people that literally work in industry to pay to stay in London, go on a couple of nights out, and then they're spent. But no one gets into industry wanting to be a runner. A lot of them, start out wanting to be directors, writers, producers, editors. But pretty soon you can get consumed by it. So it's about having that balance and making sure that you protect the reason that you got into the industry. Like the question that you asked before about passion, I were at the film school literally one day, right? And I was 23 at the time. And I had to go outside and have a word with myself. And I literally remember standing out in Millennium Square in Leeds. Like I must have looked mad. Like, and I was literally saying to myself, I need to protect my passion because sometimes as well, going to a film school, being taught by people that are a bit jaded and a bit negative kicks that passion out of you. And as soon as you lose it, it's gone. You've got to protect it.
I'm just going to interject to say the BFI, of course, doesn't endorse actively trying to get sacked as a
No,
career, but no, but but
I didn't try to get sacked. I just weren't very good at my jobs.
if you happen to get sacked, life goes on for a filmmaker.
Yeah,
I mean, Sarah, we've spoken a little bit about jobs outside the screen industry, but how about jobs and work inside the screen industry? I mean, for you and again for filmmakers that how much have you been asked to work for free and to work for wages that aren't livable? I mean, how common has that been? How common is that still now?
It's very common, and I still get asked it now. I get asked, I do access consultancy work, and people want me to do it for free. So it's very common. I mean, for me, I've been a mum pretty much my whole adult life. I've got a 21-year-old, and I was a single mum, and luckily my rent's cheap. I'm a council tenant, so I don't pay as much as someone in London. But still I was having to feed someone, so that having the side job, I've always had side jobs, I've always had that on the side, like what the others are Jordon and Karla are talking about. And it's uh, my very first thing that I did in the industry was an internship, and it was for 2 months with quite a big broadcaster, and it was unpaid. So I was paying like 20 quid a day getting in. Back then it was a Labour government, that's how long ago it was, the last Labour government. And there was a new deal for lone parents, so I could get half price travel. But even then, it was like it was a choice. I needed to do that internship to get into the industry, but then I was paying I was out of pocket doing it and getting that experience. And yeah, I was an actor for 15 years as well, so I've done quite a few different things. And I think actors get asked to do stuff for free all of the time, and like, oh, we'll give you show reel footage, which actors need. They want to build that up. But yeah, it's difficult to sustain like a regular income, I feel.
I mean, when you're starting out, how do you find the balance between, wanting desperately to take advantage of the opportunities that the opportunities are hard to come by. So when they come, you're tempted to just grab them. But then the reality that some of those opportunities are going to be impossible, actually, or they're going to put you into financially very, very difficult situations.
Yeah, I used to turn down auditions because I couldn't afford to get in to London. I just would have to, and that was gutting. And it was weighing up, is this going to be, economically viable to do? And can I actually go in every night and do a theatre show when I then have to think of childcare on top of that as well?
So it sounds like there's, in the best sense, there's a sort of self-preservation which kicks in, and at a certain point, you do have to say, obviously, you've got kids, so that's a whole other angle as well. But even without that, you have to look after yourself, and actually, there are points where you have to prioritize getting the rent paid.
Yeah, but I think it's also like what Karla was saying. If you've got that creative need and you need to do it, you really do need to do it. You need to fulfill that and you need to have that. So, I'm very much an advocate for follow your dreams and go for what it is that you want. If you don't ask, you don't get. Reach out to people that you admire, all of that stuff. But also that there's no shame in having a side job. That's okay. And I think the media can sometimes shame people. There's actors who've been on a soap and then there's pictures of them working in a supermarket. Good for them. They're putting food on the table. I think that's brilliant. But, they're really shamed for that. So I think, yeah, there's a bit of a culture. I was working behind a bar in my 30s and just to supplement my creative career, but it meant that I could pay to go into London and do stuff.
Yeah, there's also a whole argument that says that actually, like, going out into the world and like having jobs and having to pay the rent with the money you make from the jobs. I mean, this is all really quite valuable creative life experience, whether you're an actor or a writer or a director. I mean, it's like, the real world is a place you should spend a lot of time in. I mean, Karla, let me come back to you to speak to this from a writer's point of view. So much script writing, as you know better than anyone, is done on spec. It's for projects that haven't been funded, might never be funded. When you were first trying to get people interested in your writing projects, at what point did you judge when to ask for some money for that? At what point do you say, actually, at this point, we've spoken about the ideas, we've had a lot of cups of coffee. At what point do I get paid?
So for me, I started off writing scripts straight off the bat. So I didn't start off like writing treatments or one pages. So I did about 3 or 4 scripts that I just decided I was going to write, like a couple early drafts of. So I wasn't the person to decide when I should get paid for that because I decided already that I'm just going to do it for free. So I got my first option deal in 2020 during BLM summer. And that was the first time that I was actually paid for a script that I had written. And because obviously it was an actual script that was being optioned rather than an idea or like a treatment that was being optioned, I got paid a little more than you would. So just to give people numbers and so they know. So like if you have like an idea as a writer and a production company option that idea and it's currently like a 1 page stage, you can get paid like £1,500 to then work on a treatment with the production company. But back in 2020, I got paid £10,000 to work with them for 18 months on a script because they were optioning the script rather than the rather than the idea. So I guess financially it worked out better. I mean, it still wasn't enough to live on, and I still continued to live in my dad's house because I couldn't afford to move out. But I think the work that I put in before to create a script as opposed to a 1 pager did pay out because then I was paid more when it was picked up than I was if it was like a 1 pager. So I think to begin with, it was less when I decide I should get paid and more when I found a production company that was really interested in the idea and wanted to take it on board for them to be like, okay, cool, this is what we're gonna offer you.
I've got to say, it's really refreshing and kind of, in my experience, really unusual to hear someone who'll actually just talk openly about the numbers. And I mean, I'm curious as to all three of your responses to this point, which is, I said at the top of the conversation, money's a bit of a secret within the industry. I mean, even talking about the stuff we're talking about doesn't happen that often. And when you talk about specific payments, which kind of people need to know because they need to know whether they're getting underpaid, it always feels like there's a bit of a veil of secrecy around that. And filmmaking is one of these businesses where everyone is an individual to an extent. I mean, I wonder, do you feel that the industry kind of plays on that a little bit and like people aren't supposed to tell each other how much you got paid for a project. They're supposed to be, everybody's supposed to keep that information to themselves.
Yeah, 100%. And I've got a bit of an issue with the level of secrecy sometimes in this industry, because I left the full-time job in 2015, didn't sign to my agent, my Curtis Brown agent, until 2020. And I think I spent a huge amount of those 5 years not really knowing what to do and not really knowing who to talk to, what I should be working on. So like I was networking, but I was networking at events that really weren't significant. They weren't places I should have been networking. Like nobody in TV was attending these events. So I have a bit of a issue with the limited sharing of information sometimes in the industry, because it directly affected me. As someone who knew that film school wasn't an option for me. Like I wasn't a filmmaker, I was a writer. So I was a bit like, I didn't know who to talk to. I didn't know what I should be doing. I had no contacts, nothing. And I spent years, I call it stumbling around in the dark, because I just didn't know. So for me now, the position that I'm in, I'm quite open to talk about things that I wish somebody had told me before, because I've had significant breakthroughs in my career when people have been quite direct and open with me and said, actually, Karla, you're doing that. That's not working. You should be over here. And then I'm like, okay, cool. Now I get it. And then I can literally see the progression in my career because of that. So I'm personally, I'm huge being honest and open about stuff, because there's so much knowledge that, because also I think there's one thing being taught the business of working in this industry, say in film school, and then actually navigating what it's like as a creative building your career in our industry. And I think there's a lot of information that you don't get taught. You only pick that up from doing it. So if I can be open and share information with people to help their journey be a little bit easier, then I'm all for it. Because I wish, and to be fair, there were a few key people who were quite open with me, which I was really grateful for. But there was so much stuff that I didn't know I was doing wrong. So therefore I couldn't fix and change to move my career forward.
Sarah, how do you feel about that? Because it sometimes feels that you're not supposed to be transparent, and that, I mean, part of that is so that it kind of, from a producer's point of view, it can keep everybody on their toes. And also, there's an assumption, I think, at a certain level of the film industry that people don't need to really worry about money. So you don't talk about money because everyone's kind of doing okay. Have you encountered that as well?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, you could go into like the gender pay gap and, not being spoken about at all. So we don't know what we're being paid. But I agree with what Karla's saying. Knowledge is power, and knowing the right places to go. And even like with networking events, and that, that can cost money to go to these things. They often quite do not meet my access needs. They're not something that I can generally go to. So then you feel like it is a bit of a closed shop, and you don't have the same access that other people have in going to these things. And there's a bit of, the who you know, and dare I say nepotism that I've definitely seen happen. Sorry, I'm probably not answering the question. Probably what you asked.
No, I think you are.
But
Well, it's kind of actually, I mean, this question was about transparency about money, which you have
yeah.
spoken about, but also, I mean, there is, as you've brilliantly sort of alighted on, there's a bit of a wider issue of transparency, because once you start pulling at this thread and asking for transparency about money, there's lots of other areas that the film industry could probably be more transparent about. I guess, I mean, and I know that I think all four of us feel the same about this. It's really great to kind of identify those problems, and then also to try and sort of move past them and find ways to kind of to crack that nut, isn't it? Which all three of you are doing brilliantly. But yeah, there is that. I suppose the first step to solving a problem is to identify it as a problem, and it does feel like nobody ever talking about how much they got paid for the last job they did. It's a really weird. You don't, as Karla was saying, you don't get this in other industries, in other forms of work. I mean, that idea that like nobody actually has a pay slip and there's like a secret sum of money arrives in your bank account. It's a bit mad, really.
A lot of my mates are like writers and stuff that are a bit more advanced, like further along in their career. So they pretty much like told me from day one. But I was sort of like pulled from like obscurity. Like someone saw a film of mine and asked me if I wanted to make it into TV series. And I went into it completely, just blind. Like as soon as they're like, do you want to make a TV series? You're trying to play it cool at meeting, but in your head you're like, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. And then yeah, so like next thing I know, they're giving me an offer, and like you've got money written down. It's more money than you've seen it last like 5, 10 years. And I'd have signed anything. Do you know what I mean? And it was luckily I got an agent immediately once I got my offer. And my agent just like she rejected the deal, and I was like, you know, panicking, like, what's happening? And she's like, no, trust me. And I ended up getting double, but it was that like I had no knowledge of what you're supposed to get paid for anything. So, you know, I'd have just signed out. And I think it's you're not taught it at school, you're not taught it at university, you're not taught it at film school. Like no one teaches you how to talk about money. And it took me a long time as well, where I actually got to a point in my life where I was comfortable when someone asked me to do something, I'll flat out just ask them what the pay is straight away. Whereas like for the first 5 years of my career, I was like grateful that they were asking me. And, you know, I did, you know, quite often did jobs that took me a long time and I didn't get paid an awful lot for it. And people act like they're doing you a favor, but in reality, so like now I just ask them straight up, like, what's the pay, you know?
It's a really interesting and useful skill, isn't it? Like the first skill, yeah, to actually ask what the money is, and then secondly, maybe to actually ask for more money. Like, but neither of those things necessarily come naturally. I think maybe if you're particularly a creative person, because as you've talked about, you know, it's exciting. If somebody likes your work and wants to make something with your idea, that just feels like there's a part of you that wants to do that for free or would be happy to do it for free. But not everybody does. So you'd recommend, again, like practically thinking about what people can take away. Getting an agent is obviously always it can obviously be a headache and a saga in itself, but financially, from your experience, it's always worth it to have that agent between you.
100%. A lot of people won't touch you with a deal if you haven't got an agent. Like I was in a unique position where I got a TV show without an agent, but then they were like, but now you need to get an agent for like ethical reasons. But also there's even though like, you know, there's that it's really difficult to get an agent. Like I speak to a lot of writers that are struggling with it. But a lot of agents will give you like advice. They will give you like legal advice, money advice. You know, like don't be afraid of asking the question. And some of them actually, you know, would just help you broker a deal as well. So like if you got yourself in a situation but you didn't have an agent, but it were kind of imperative to getting something over the line or making sure you got full value in the deal. And quite a lot of agents will help you like make that deal, you know. So never be afraid to ask the question because you can get ripped off if not. But luckily for me, I've worked with some production companies that are more than fair, and they were the ones that advised me to do that, which they didn't have to.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I think there's an assumption that it's a Shark Tank, the industry, and I mean it is to an extent, but actually, you don't. At the same time, you don't ask if you don't get given if you don't ask. So actually, production companies can be open to having those conversations, but you are often going to have to be the one who says, "I'm not sure that I can do it for this amount of money."
Totally, but I also think I know what you're saying about the Shark Tank thing, but when I were at film school, we were kind of like prepared for that, you know, like it's a proper cutthroat industry, everyone's out to get you. And I've actually been like pleasantly surprised actually by, you know, how supportive people can be. And but the thing is it's supportive if you're signposted to the places where you can get support. And a lot of us don't have that knowledge. So that's why the place where I work in Bradford, the unit, that's like ideal for people in West Yorkshire, but anybody really that just needs general support and advice because I can't imagine what Bradford or even like the area was like before it existed because I myself were ripping myself off. So God knows what were going on before then.
Let me just circle back to London, which has already come up a couple of times. Jordon, you just mentioned Bradford as a point of contrast. You're not working in London. Sarah, you're not working in London either. But how hard has that been to actually to find a way in film that doesn't involve living in the capital?
To be honest, I always have to go into London generally for work. I'm trying now to shoot stuff locally to me, and giving people opportunities that don't live in London. But yeah, I'm like I said, I'm 20-minute train ride, so it's not far. So in terms of traveling, it's easy enough, but it's just, yeah, the expense of it. But as I mentioned as well, I'm in a council house, so weighing it up with that as well, it would cost a lot more to live in London than paying the travel to get in. But yeah, I mean, maybe it's because I am in the home counties and I'm so close to it, I can only really see what's happening in the London bubble.
Jordon, how about you? I mean, Bradford is far enough away that it does feel like a different place. And I'm assuming, you know, when your ideas in your career is taking off in the way you've talked about, there must have been that moment where you thought, well, now what I have to do is move to London, and you haven't.
No, for me, like Bradford's centre at universe, you know, if people should from London should be coming to Bradford because that's where it's at. No, like for me, it would. I actually find that my advantage is being the council estate kid from Bradford, from Dewsbury. You know, like that to me has been like my like USP. So I found that like I've never had to move to London. For the first 10 years of my career, I weren't really doing much. I was doing quite a lot of videography and stuff like that, you know, just keeping my head like, above the water. And then everything changed for me in 2022, which it was just like a pivotal moment where I got one thing and then I started getting the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And in that time, I mean, I sort of look at that as that's sort of when my career started. So I always feel like even though I'm 37, I feel like my career's only like maybe 2, 3 years old. So like I found that I've not had to go to London at all, really, because people are now like the industry seems to be changing more and more where they're looking for more regional based content, but with like universal audiences. So in reality, a lot of, especially since like my career taking off post lockdown, people are more used to having these sort of conversations like over Zoom and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, I'll have like maybe 2 or 3 like meetings a week with like just general companies and stuff about different projects and that. And I get quite a lot of stuff like off those meetings, but I'll only actually go to London maybe 2, 3 times a year. Um, and what I'll tend to do is cram a day where I'll see like 10 companies in like 24 hours. But the reality is, I like doing it. That's why I do it. Like I could make it easy. I could probably do them all over Zoom. But there's something like romantic to me about going to London and having meetings in the building. Because like I never thought in a million years that that would have been me. I always thought I was going to be independent, making films for like 2, 3 grand. That were it. So yeah, I don't have to go to London. I like doing it, and I just feel like like a buzz off it. But I go like maybe 2 or 3 times a year, and I'll see quite a lot of companies. But the reality is, my day to day is Zoom calls constantly. And the reason that I think I've been getting so much stuff like commissioned over the last couple of years is because I'm coming from an area where there hasn't been an awful lot of films made in that area. So it's a completely new and unique perspective. And I've never really had any interest in working in the industry in any other capacity other than writing and directing. That's why it's taken me so long to get going. So I imagine if I wanted to get in the industry and get more experience, like working like below the line and stuff, then I think it would have been more important because quite a lot of productions tend to happen like in South, don't they?
Can I
Oh,
just quickly interject there with regards to the London thing? So I'm a bit opposite. So I was in London and now I'm not in London. So I was in London, born and raised, Northwest London girl my whole life. And then when I finally got my first TV credit and I made enough to actually move out of my dad's house, I didn't want to stay in London because I didn't want to jump into another flat share. I actually wanted a place of my own. So I moved to Reading 2.5 years ago. So I'm currently managing my writing career being based in Reading, and I'm finding it's quite easy to do. Like I don't think you need to be based in London. So I kind of travel into London a couple times a month. And a bit like Jordan, I do a lot of interaction over Zoom. And obviously you can write anywhere, doesn't make any difference. So yeah, so I've been in London and now I've moved out.
it's interesting. It's a bit of a good news story actually in a sense because I definitely remember having conversations pre-COVID really around this sort of subject. And at that point, the idea, you'd speak to younger filmmakers and filmmakers from a working class background, and they did feel like they had to come to London. There was literally no alternative, and that was you had to sink whatever money had to be sunk into that into the city had to happen before anything else could. And now it does feel like we've moved on a little bit simply because of kind of what we're doing now. And Jordan, as you were saying as well, maybe an appetite as well for a wider menu of stories. Feels like we're in a different place, so that's great. We've talked a lot about kind of getting into a screen career. Obviously, what happens then is staying in a screen career, which in some ways is harder. Karla, I mean, for you, how do you think issues around money change further into your career? I mean, you were talking about 2020 as a kind of breakthrough moment. Obviously, 5 years later, what kind of role is money playing now? Has that changed?
It has changed. So 2020 was my first option deal. I went also signed to my agency at Curtis Brown. And then 2022, I booked Grantchester, which on ITV, which was my first TV credit. And then I was like, great, finally, as a late 30-year-old, I can finally move out of my dad's house, which I did and moved to Reading. And I think I underestimated how much work would be required to sustain my career. So I think, and again, this was a pure lack of knowledge thing. because I'd been told quite a lot that once you get a credit, things will start happening and sort of opportunities will come. And that didn't happen for me. So I worked on Grantchester and the money from that sort of looked after me for a good 6, 7 months. But now I actually had rent and bills to pay. So it became quite a struggle for the sort of next year. And I continued to be freelance, but I found I ended up having to do jobs to pay the bills, which took me away from writing. So I've got some sort of small production background as well. And with MsMono, I've done some producing. So the year after Grantchester, I ended up doing quite a lot of local Reading-based production of like community projects. And I didn't make much money at all. I didn't do any TV work at all. So it wasn't until sort of the start of, oh no, July last year, when I realized I actually just need to be focused more on writing and creating more projects is kind of what I need to be focused on. And at that point, I decided to get a part-time job, which I'm still doing now. So I work 2.5 days a week on doing admin at one organization and half a day a week at another organization. And then the rest of the week is writing, coming up with new ideas, meeting people alongside building my production company, MsMono. So money for me is still an issue. It's 100% still an issue. And I'm not yet in a place where I can make a full-time income from being a creative alone.
I wanted to ask about MsMono. You have your own production company. Why did you take that step? Why did you move from simply being a writer to being a producer as well? And what have been the benefits of that?
So MsMono kind of came about, from being perfectly honest, kind of like a fluke. So I was working with a director called Rebecca Coley on a project a couple of years ago, and it was like a music video that we were working on together, like a narrative-based music video. And we were just having a chat about how we really love female-focused projects and how we'd really love to make more of them. And we were like having pizza, and then we were like, oh, we should set up a production company, and kind of laughed about it. But then the days went on and the idea didn't go away. So literally that's how MsMono was started. So I would say, and that was back in 2017. And then in 2019, I personally relaunched the company on my own and started being a bit more focused with the projects that we were making. But equally, truth be told, I didn't really know what I was doing. Like I was just kind of figuring it out one project after another. So then there was like a period of 5 years when I was doing that and figuring out what I liked to do, what I didn't like to do, the kind of projects I wanted to make, the kind of people I wanted to work with, the kind of format I wanted to be in. So we started off in short film. Now we're moving into audio. So I've spent the sort of last 5 years really figuring out how I want to build the company moving forward. So now I'm in a great place of having the knowledge and the experience, which has given me the ability to be more strategic moving forward with the company. But the reason we set it up was just so we could have more control over the kind of female stories that we wanted to tell. That's kind of where it all came from. And in that time, I've sort of organically refined and processed what that actually looks like for the company and how I actually do that.
Sarah, how about you? I mean, you're building a body of work as well with Inclusivity Films, as a writer and a director and also a producer. I mean, I'm wondering, when you're first imagining projects, scoping out projects creatively, are you also immediately thinking about budgets and like how financially realistic that project can be?
Yeah, always. I always forget to put a line in for myself, so I need to start doing that a bit more. But it's really important to me that everyone gets paid. So also as part of our company, because it's at least 50% of our cast and crew identify as deaf, disabled and or neurodivergent. And as it's an access need of mine as well, around my caring responsibilities, we do a maximum 8-hour days. So then we end up doing more days, which then costs more, especially if we're paying daily rates. So yeah, budget is right from the very beginning. We're thinking of those things. Not necessarily when I'm writing, although sometimes I am writing to budget. Like I'll make sure it's like one location and there's not so many actors and things like that. But I tend to not worry too much because I don't want to restrict myself in my writing in that way.
And I wanted to ask you the same question I asked Karla as well, which is, as well as getting the project made financially, I mean, in your own life as well, once you are, not in that very early career stage, when you've moved in, what happens to the need for money? Because obviously, as you talked about having a family, that's an obvious, very practical need. I mean, how much more complicated does it become in the middle of your career compared to earlier on?
I think it's just as complicated now for me as it was when I was younger. And just like what Karla was saying, I still need to have a side job. I don't earn exclusively from my creative career, but I have tried to really find work, not always, I've done all different types of jobs, but work that still fulfills me creatively that might not necessarily be in TV and film. I like to upcycle furniture. That's something I do and then sell that on. Doesn't make a great deal of money, but it's something else. So it's just, I think finding something that's gonna keep you happy as well. So you're not stuck in something you hate. But like I said, I've been a parent forever, it feels like. So I haven't really, it's always been the same things that I've needed to do, paying the bills. So I moved out very young. So yeah, I'm sorry, that doesn't really feel it's not a very positive story, but yeah, well, I hope in some ways it is just to say that, you can do other things as well and still get that creative fulfillment.
No, I mean it's a positive story because you're making the work, right? I mean, and the work is great. So that's the positivity.
Yeah, true.
And talking of work getting made, Jordan, I'm going to go in a second to questions from the people who've been sitting watching us natter. But before I do that, I did want to ask about Suicide Kelly, which was the feature you made. You made that for £10,000, which is on one level a lot of money. I mean, if it popped into our account tomorrow, I'm sure we'd all notice it. But in filmmaking terms, 10 grand is nothing. And an incredible achievement. You got it done. How did you get it done for that amount of money, and what did you learn from that experience?
It basically started because I'd just turned 30 and I'd always had it in my head. And I don't know why people do this. When you set like a limit in your head that I want to make a feature before I'm like 30 or whatever. And I hit 30 and I had that crisis moment and I thought, oh, I've not made my feature. And I'd grown up watching stuff like, like Clerks, where they just literally just shot the film in a shop. And I always wanted that experience of making a film with me mates as like my first like film. And I've been watching loads of Cassavetes stuff at the time, and I just thought I want to make something that's set in like one location with a minimal cast. And I basically met this producer, and she got like 10 grand to go make a short film, and I just basically talked her into letting me do like a feature length version. And yeah, I just called on favors left, right, and center. I was still running on naivety and passion, and I think that's a really important thing that you need to an extent, protect your naivety, because I thought like the only way I'm ever going to become a director is by directing films. It's not a case of you can be a first AD and then one day the director doesn't turn up and people ask, does anyone know how to direct? It's literally your only way you're going to get paid to direct is by directing films. And I just felt like I'd seen a lot of people making a lot of short films that, go out and they win like an award at a festival and then they just dissipate and they don't end up anywhere. And I just thought I needed like a bold statement, but also to just have a lot of fun in doing it and do something so personal that I were embarrassed to share it. I'd heard a quote from Tarantino where he said that you've got to be that embarrassed to share your films. That's how personal they've got to be. So I just piled all that into a film that were about, a working class story at a time where Leeds as a city were promoting itself as a tourist destination and forgetting about the people that are left on the outskirts and, not a part of that. And I just thought, well, what better way of getting a little bit of like attention, really, than telling truth and telling a story that's, based on my own upbringing and stuff. So yeah, I made Suicide Kelly and I just packed it with heart and soul and passion. And, there were a lot of things that I didn't know how to do. I had to teach myself how to edit whilst making the film. We made the film in 2017. It's only just about to get released. That's how long it sort of took to get completed. And then I thought, if someone sees it and says, you know what, when I said before about I felt seen like Kez in the first season of Shameless, if one person says to me they felt seen by that film, then it'd be worth it. And then randomly it got into British Urban Film Festival, which I didn't expect, and it ended up winning Best Picture. So like I was just blown away. And then since then, it does help, like getting that validation from somewhere. Since then, I've worked with Channel 4. I'm doing a film in 2 months with the BBC, doing a TV series, and it's all from that. It's from making. I kind of saw it as I needed to cut in the queue because the queue was so long that by the time I got to the front of it, I'd have been 175. So I just thought I needed to do something bold. And luckily, I had a good network of people around me and we were able to do it.
Excellent. Well, listen, I mean, I could talk to all three of you for another few hours, but there's a pile up of questions that I want to get to. All of these questions are great. I'm going to try and get through as many of them as I can. So we're being asked, do you have any advice on how to balance being readily available for potential short notice runner jobs? But I guess the same would apply for any kind of job in the film industry, really, while also being scheduled for work shifts weeks prior. I mean, we've talked a little bit about that, the demands of trying to do two things at once, doing regular jobs and film industry jobs. On a really nuts and bolts level, if you're supposed to be at a shift and then the phone rings, what do you do?
Yeah, I mean, I had that so many times when I was doing bar work, and I was on a 0 hours contract, so I had the flexibility in that. Although that also meant that I didn't always get hours each week, which was really difficult. So yeah, just trying to find flexible jobs that are okay with it, but it is very hard because these things do come up very last minute. And just really getting buddies that you work with that are happy to swap shifts, which is what I was doing all the time.
So it's kind of on a funny level, it's kind of actually about contact, isn't it? It's about actually having like a friend who you can tug on their sleeve a little bit and get them to cover you. Um, we haven't spoken much about sort of traineeships and internships and that kind of thing, which I know happens a lot. I mean, I don't all three of your experiences fall slightly outside that, but somebody's asking, and I think it's a really important question, how they make the leap from traineeships and internships. And there are quite a lot of internships and mentoring schemes and shadowing schemes out there. How do you make that jump to actual jobs? I mean, all three of you have done that. All three of you have moved into making films and everyone's getting paid. How does that happen?
Think like just from my point of view, I can only look at it from a point of view in West Yorkshire, but because we've got places like the unit, we've got people, we've got like schemes that are directly connected to what it is that we're doing. So I'm always trying my best to get as many people that are completely fresh to it, or getting them practical experience on set. We had an ethos at Either Work Factory that we still have to this day, where we like to have like 50% of crew as like first time people, because it's amazing how fast people can learn. And I think I also teach at Met Film in Leeds, and I'm always trying to look for like the next like up and coming like filmmakers and stuff. And it's about that, like find places that are connected. So like in like Bradford, for example, there's the unit, but there's also places like Screen Yorkshire and Film Up North and stuff, and New Writing North, and we're connected to all those places. So anyone that's looking for experience, we can directly connect to filmmaking experience. And then we see people like rise so fast. Like you give someone like their first shot as like a camera trainee or whatever, and within like 3 months, we've seen them working in industry as like a camera assistant and stuff. So it's about that. It's about scoping out the places that are supporting up and coming talent, and just let it be known to them that you're looking for opportunities, because they are people, and most film productions as well, they get financial dispensation for giving trainees opportunities. So they are looking for you. It's just about finding people that can connect you with them.
I think that's a really good point as well, because I know a lot of the time when people end up on those kind of mentorship schemes or internships, I mean, they feel like they're being done a favor, but it's a really, really worthwhile point to remember that actually, as you say, the production company or the agency involved, are benefiting from that. They're benefiting from your talent and they're benefiting financially. So it's kind of a win-win. I mean, the flip side of that, and we haven't spoken really about this, so I'm glad it's come up, is the vexed question of working for free. And I don't really know the answer to this myself. I'd be much more interested in your three answers. I mean, the question that's come in is it a good idea to help make or act in short films for free in your teams to gain experience while still in education to network with other people? Because obviously there's huge benefits. But even outside of your teams, I mean, as all three of you will know, the film industry has a lot of opportunities for people who will work for nothing. What are the rights and wrongs of doing that? Is it wise? Should it be going on?
So for me personally, as a writer, you kind of have to work for free. Like you can say you're a writer, but people want to see a script, and people are unlikely to pay you to write a script until they've seen that you can write one before. So from a writer's point of view, you only benefit and improve and get better the more that you write. So there is benefit for you to work on a script for free that you can then potentially sell later. So in that regard, yeah, it's worth it, because one, you need a portfolio of work, you need a sample script, and two, you constantly should be working on developing your craft. And you do that by working on scripts. I know it's quite different for other roles in film and TV. Um, but I do think sometimes working for free is useful, but I think you as an individual need to know when it's no longer working for you and if this is the project that you should be working for free on. So if you've got quite a bit of experience already, so I've done a bit of sort of journalism work before as well, sort of another way to supplement my income. And there was a time when I was writing reviews and doing interviews to help build my portfolio. But then I had a sufficient enough portfolio that I didn't need to keep working for free. So then I would focus on trying to get paid jobs as opposed to free ones, because there was no benefit for me to write another 500-word review on a film when I already had 15 in my portfolio. So it was that line of, what are you getting from this free exchange? And if it is benefiting you to help build your career, great. But then you get to a point where you shouldn't be working for free anymore. And you don't need this particular opportunity because you might have gained whatever experience that opportunity could give you from another project. So I think you need to decide what's the benefit here for you of working for free.
And Sarah and Jordan, I want to bring you both in on this point as well, and not necessarily just in terms of you having been asked to work for free, but also, you know, you're both producers. You can both bring in projects. You're going to have talented people who are going to come to you and say, "I really want to work on this," and you'll know they'll work for free. But at what point do you actually have to not take advantage of that and actually make sure that everybody is getting paid properly?
Yeah, I think with Suicide Kelly, it was kind of like I had no choice. But the people that did, and no one worked for free, but a lot of people worked below rate. But there were people that I'd worked for them below rate. It was that sort of situation. When you start doing stuff for like TV and stuff, you absolutely cannot do that because there's like laws against it and stuff like that. But I also think it's important. Like I did a music video about 2 weeks ago, literally as a favor to a person that, you know, been asking me for ages, and I just loved the work. And I knew loads of filmmakers, and part of the reason I did it is because I knew a lot of actors and a lot of filmmakers that needed some credits. So what I did was I took people that were trainees and put them in heads of departments roles, and you know the outcome of that were amazing. But it's like Karla was saying, like, you know, those people need to know their limits. Don't just do anything for free. The juice has got to be worth the squeeze, essentially. And if you're an actor, especially, I think as an actor, there's two reasons to do something for free. One, get your bad habits out on somewhere that's not that important. You know, like just learn your craft, work, you know, like learn your experience and stuff by doing something that, you know, the outcome's not that important. And secondly, I feel like it's just important to just, you know, it's a good networking opportunity for you as well. But as well, showreel material tends to cost about 400 quid. If you can work on some, like you find a hot director that's on his way up or her way up, and you think the project's amazing and they want you to do some pretty good scenes and stuff like that, you're better off doing that for free than paying someone 400 quid to knock you together a showreel scene. So it's about assessing every situation independently.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah, I agree around actors, because having been an actor and done stuff for free, if you're building up showreel footage, then that's great. I'd always advise against going to the showreel companies. As someone who's worked on the casting side of things and the agency, they stick out a mile. And I think it's better to go with people who are making short films. And yeah, so I think that's really important. Personally, we do pay for work experience, and we always have that on our sets. And I think it is about, you know, opening it up, but also if people want to come and shadow, and like having people shadow in each department, so they're not necessarily working, but they're just going to come and sit and watch on set. They wouldn't get paid for that, but then that is a great way of getting in and just seeing how a set works and just seeing the different roles on set to see what might, you know, you might want to go into.
And in terms of putting the funding together to actually get something in front of the camera, somebody's asked what your opinion is on GoFundMe, Kickstarter, all of those kind of fundraising platforms being used to raise money for short films and student films. From your experience, are they effective? I mean, if you've enjoyed them or you've used them, do you have any tips for what works and what doesn't?
From my experience, there wasn't successful. You know, I remember when we were trying to get money for Suicide Kelly, I think we ended up with about £1,000, and then we wanted like 10 grand. And then luckily, you know, we found the producer that had 10 grand. So no, they weren't successful. But on the other hand, you see some people that are successful. I think it depends on your network. and the people around you and how much they're willing to give and stuff. What I would say is a more effective way of getting into making films is with each film, try and go up a level. So like start with a film that cost you nothing. Like at the unit, we do a 5-minute film club where we only accept films that cost nothing to make. And it's to get people to a point where they're completely ready to make that next step. So then your next step is like, right, now try and raise a couple of grand, get that film made, then do a 10 grand film. Once you get to that point, once you've hit that 2 grand mark and you've shown that you know how to work a budget, you know how to get value money on screen, it makes it 10 times easier to get funding from places like the BFI and like Film Up North and places like that. The people that tend not to get funding are people that their project is reliant on them being able to get some finance towards it. So therefore they never make any films. So what I'd say is, you know, those ones that are going to cost you money, save them as like your babies that are going to help you like break through. But in the meantime, be making stuff all the time that costs you nothing to make. Because one, you'll be able to stretch your pound a lot further when you do get some money. But two, you're more likely to be able to get funding from a proper finance body, and as well, not just finance bodies, but local councils and stuff, if you've proved that you've gone out and made stuff off your own back. So another thing that we offer at the unit is we give people free equipment. So when someone's making a no budget film and you go to a place like the unit, you can make it look 5 grand. So therefore you'll get the 10 grand much quicker.
So it's that idea, which again, it sounds simple in theory, but it's harder to put in practice, but important. If you're a writer, then you write. If you're a director, you direct. Like you actually, you find a way to get the work done, and then kind of things follow a little bit from there.
I think so. I think like if Suicide Kelly, if that had cost 100 grand, I don't think it'd be half the film that it is. Do you know what I mean? It's knowing your limits and working within them inspires more creativity, I think, and I think that's such an important factor. So don't get too carried away with the idea that you can't make a great film because you don't have funding, because that's not the case at all.
So I've got a couple of questions that I'm going to jump back in and ask. But a couple of people have asked about networking and about contacts, and I wanted to ask all three of you about that because I mean, there's a negative and a positive to contacts. I mean, there's that idea that the film industry runs on who you know, which it does to an extent, and I think that people can feel excluded by that. But then it is also possible to set your own networks up. And I wondered how important all three of you felt it was to be constantly making connections. I mean, actually, kind of events like this, both with people who could connect you with funding and also other talent, who can understand what it's like to have come into this industry without financial advantage. I mean, is like a big tool in the toolkit actually just speaking to each other.
100%, I would say. And for someone who knew absolutely no one when I started, like I knew nothing, and I didn't even really know what it took to work in the industry. And also networking really freaked me out because I thought you had to be this kind of person that could walk in a room and like speak to everyone in the room and schmooze the room and all this stuff, which just wasn't me. I've come to realize that networking, I'd say, is 50% of the work. Like 50% is the writing, the directing, the producing, the acting, and the other 50% is the network. But it's 100% possible to build your network and build a group of people who want to do stuff, make stuff that you want to make, and can support your career and who you can support. So like it is a bit of nepotism, 100%. But then at the same time, you can turn that on its head and begin to build your own network and your own connections. So I would say networking is hugely important, but don't just look to be networking up, like network across, like network with other writers, network with other directors, other actors, people who are on similar levels to you, are trying to get to the same places as you. Like you can work together, and is what I would say. Like it's not just about, I don't know, trying to get a BFI commissioner in your network. It's about the people making the projects and the work as well. But networking is fundamental. Like you can't really move forward in your career without a network.
And it's funny, isn't it? I guess you have to tell yourself, and this is first-hand experience, so I've had to tell myself this a lot, that actually, you feel awkward and pushy as soon as you go and talk to somebody, but actually the film industry is kind of made up of pushy people, and actually no one is going to be freaked out by that. So actually, if you do go and approach someone, if you can find that confidence, the person you go and talk to, they're not going to be looking at you thinking, what a pushy person, because it's sort of how it functions in film.
Exactly. And also, I think just know what you would like from the individual. And again, you don't need to be in a room with someone to network with them. You can reach out to people on social media. You can send emails. Because I didn't start off being the confident person that could walk across the room and talk to someone. Like that just wasn't me. I can do that now, but when I started, I couldn't. So find also ways And I would say also have some authenticity into why you're reaching out to a particular person. So I can very clearly see the difference when I get emails from people who've actually watched the work of MsMono or something that I've written and have a reason why they've reached out to me versus I Googled production companies and now I'm getting in contact with you. So I would also say be smart about who you network with and actually have a genuine, authentic reason why you're reaching out to this person, because it's very easy to be able to tell the difference.
Yeah, that's such good advice, isn't it? Because when I speak to producers, I mean, they're obviously getting approached a lot, but there's a difference for them between being approached by somebody who really likes their work and somebody who just wants to get a film made. I mean, and
Exactly.
you do respond much more favorably to the first one when somebody actually wants to talk to you, you know. Sarah, let me bring you in. I mean, I know a lot of your stories were around kind of neurodivergence as well. And obviously that's another layer of complication, I guess, in terms of, it can be in terms of making those contacts. But how important is it for you that, you know, you are part of a network?
Yeah, it's really important. I agree with everything that Karla just said, and like networking across. And I'm slightly distracted by the chat. Everyone's sharing their Instas, which is great, and people are doing that. So, you know, you might all get together and go to the unit in Bradford now and borrow the equipment and make a film. So that's fantastic to see. So it is so much about networking, but being, so I'm autistic, have ADHD, and you know, my access needs going into a room where it's very noisy just aren't often met. So I can find it really difficult, and I'll often go for like the beginning and then not stay very long, even now. Places are getting better, and I'm more confident now I'm older to be able to say these are what my access needs are going in. I did see someone in the chat had written about being neurodivergent. But I think now that we can do stuff online and reach out to people, I think that is the best way. And I mentioned earlier, if you don't ask, you don't get. So if there's someone you admire, write to them. And like Karla said, do your research. As part of an agency that I co-founded, we get a lot of representation inquiries, and you can really, again, tell when people have done their research because they call us by our names rather than madam or sir, and there's no sirs in our agency. So yeah, I think it's really important.
It's important, but also, I mean, one of the things I took from that answer was that idea that, you know, the film industry party is a great opportunity, but actually there are other ways of doing that as well, and it's not the be all and end all. And so if for whatever reason you find those environments difficult, there are other ways to speak to people, and in fact, often like more productive ways than trying to badger somebody in the corner of some hectic event.
Definitely. I think social media plays a huge part. It's played a huge part in everything that I've been doing for the past few years, in just connecting with people and people seeing the work that I'm doing. And then I'm often invited, I think probably for this as well, you know, it was in some way was via social media. So using that to your advantage and reaching out to people there because they do check their DMs.
And Jordon, it seems like so much of what you've done with Suicide Kelly, with the unit, I mean, it's about that kind of ongoing collaboration. You know, there's a whole group of other people around you as well. I mean, is that one of the secrets, do you think, to being, you know, a successful filmmaker without money, a successful filmmaker without, you know, the advantages of a middle class background? The trump card is other people.
100%. I think, yeah, I think my whole currency is my network. It's the amount of people I'm connected to, and it's constantly like growing all the time. And I think just touching on the networking thing though, I think networking is useful if you know how to network. So like I've seen events where, you know, there's been like a speaker, and then afterwards the speaker will chat to people and stuff, and every single person in the queue is pitching at them this idea they've got, and never in a million years is that how something's going to get off the ground. I think the art of networking is disarming people by being yourself, and then befriending the person and leaving the conversation open indefinitely. So then you're more likely in the long run to get something out of that situation, and vice versa. It's not about just like constantly pitching to people. I think the more genuine you are, the more friendly you are, the more someone likes you, the more likely it is that they're going to want to work with you at some point. And I think like just over time, because I mean, to be honest with you, even though I've been doing this since like, you know, 15 years probably now, my like career, if you want to call it that, started 3 years ago because I got pulled to come to one networking event. I used to hate networking, went to one networking event. I met one person that then said, oh, you should apply for this job. That job ended up becoming the unit. And through the unit, I've met all my heroes. I've met, hundreds of filmmakers, and it's completely changed my life. Like, you never know who you're talking to and who that person might become as well, because there's been a lot of people that I've just met, just casual chats, and they end up becoming massive deals in massive companies, and that shouldn't be your reason of talking to that person. The reason should be just out of general interest. You wanting to meet as many people as you can, and over time, it just pays off. Like, I got my first agent because someone that I once did a favor for, and I did it as a selfless act. I didn't think, oh, one day I'll get that paid back. She sent my film to an agent, and that's how I got my first agent. And it's funny how people often pay stuff forward. So just be a good person, just be friendly, and everyone's nervous when they're networking. Do you know what I mean? So just come across as yourself and just be genuine, and over time you'll build the right contacts.
I mean, it's really good advice on a personal level, but yeah, as you say, also on a professional level. I mean, actually, the most important person in the room at any given moment might not be the best person for you to actually talk to. They're going to be surrounded by people who are going to be approaching them, pitching them frantically, as you say. And also, the person that you end up getting talking to in the corner may well be at a similar point in their career to you, and you kind of come up together. And you kind of come up as friends, essentially, as cheesy as that sounds.
It's so true. It's so true. Like, Jen Bradfield, who's a good friend of mine, she works at Film Up North. We just got chatting because we were at a networking event and we weren't feeling it. The networking event, we were the sort of people that were stood in the corner trying to avoid like the schmoozing and stuff. We got chatting, and she's been like instrumental in my career recently, as Jen Bradfield. But we got chatting because we were like birds of a feather, and we were feeling the same way about the networking event. And like I said, you never know where roads are going to take and stuff. And when you spoke before about social media, some of the greatest things that's ever happened to me happened through social media, through just connections on social media. And I've always been like, maybe a bit too like fearless. Like, I remember one time I got chatting to Francis Ford Coppola on Instagram purely because I sent him a message just saying the reason that I use Jordon Scott Kennedy is because he calls himself Francis Ford Coppola. And I once saw an interview where he said, make your name as big as possible on screen, and we had a chat about it and stuff. And it's just mad stuff like that. You never, just try it. Like, if you're a fan of somebody, just get chatting to them, because that's what social media is for.
Film people like talking about films, right? They're always interested.
Yeah, exactly.
Listen, we're almost out of time, but I had an annoying last question for all of you. We've talked about so much, but I wondered if each of you could kind of boil down what we've talked to into one piece of advice, because there's going to be a lot of people here today who really at the very first stages of getting into the screen industry. They don't have the contacts, they don't know where to start, they don't have the financial advantages. That's why they've come to this session in the first place. If you can boil it all down for them, what's it going to be? Karla, I'm going to start with you, which is mean, I know, but
what would I say? Be brave and be bold, and like reach out to people, talk to people, engage with people, and keep making the work as best as you can at the time. But also, I would definitely say be brave and be bold, because that's something I had to kind of learn, because I had these ideas of the worst case scenario quite a lot of the time, but worst case scenario often doesn't work. So just, be brave and be bold, and push yourself ever so slightly out of your comfort zone. Yeah.
Perfect. Sarah?
I'd say it isn't very often isn't a linear career. It's not like this destination that you have to get to. So just really enjoying every part of the journey that you're on. But to really not be worried about reaching out, like what Karla said, and just, what if it goes right? What if this happens? Just think like all the positive things that could happen. And if you don't ask, you don't get. And don't be ashamed of doing any side jobs, because, it's needed sometimes.
Jordon, how about you?
I think protect your naivety. Like, for me, I always go on about it. Like, I'm still as naive today as I was when I started out. And I mean that in a good way, that, I got into this because, being a filmmaker was as mad to me back then as being an astronaut. It was like, but it's going to be fun trying to get there, and you never know who you might meet along the way. And I think the reason that I've been able to like long it out and last it, people I went to film school with, quite a lot of them packed it in like not long after film school. I think the reason that I've been able to just stick it out and have that endurance is that I don't take it all too seriously, and I just try and, the reason I went and made a 10 grand film, like a feature length film, is because I was naive enough to do it. I was romantic enough to do it. You know, I just thought, why not? You never know who might see it, and you never know what road that might take. So yeah, just protect it. And stuff like social media and comparing yourself to other people in industry is, you know, as they said, the thief of joy. You know, you'll never be who you want to be because you're comparing yourself to 2,000 people that you follow on Instagram. But in reality, everyone's just going their own journey. And, you know, like Sarah said, you know, it's not always about, you know, the journey's not always mapped out how you think it is, but you never know where you might end up. 3 years ago, I was still on universal credit, you know, and it looked like my career was going nowhere, and possibly I needed to just accept that. And then, you know, all it takes is just one chance encounter with the right person. And when, you know, someone gives you an opportunity and that door opens slightly, kick the door open, because the opportunity that I got given wasn't the opportunity that I made it into. So yeah, it's just about that. It's about take your opportunities, stay passionate, and, you know, don't let them take it from you. Like, be excited about the industry because there's good people out there, and it just takes one person, like the right person, to believe in you.
Well, listen, thank you to all three of you so sincerely, because I mean, I think actually, and I'm sure everyone on the session would agree, I mean, you know, we've covered an awful lot, and what you have said has been like really genuine, but also really inspiring because of that. And there's been a lot of like quite real world nuts and bolts takeaways for people, you know, and also just a sense that, and maybe this is the most important thing of all, I mean, nobody is in it alone. I'm actually, I mean, there are a lot of people who are going creatively and practically financially, a lot of people are going through very sort of similar situations. So listen, all three of you, thank you so much. And everyone who's in the session today, I guess, stay in touch with each other. I mean, that's another thing that we would say, is to keep the spirit of this session going.